Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down the big ideas. So, have you ever looked at a law and just thought, why? Why is this the rule? Does it even work? Well, today, we're going to look at the entire legal world through a really powerful and, yeah, sometimes controversial new lens.
I mean, let's be honest, laws can feel super complicated, maybe even random. But what if we just reframed the whole thing? What if every single legal rule, from a parking ticket to a huge corporate regulation, was nothing more than a price tag for a certain kind of behavior? That one question, that's the key to unlocking a whole new way of seeing how the law actually works.
So, to see the law this way, we're going to need a special tool. Think of it like a specific kind of lens that helps us find the hidden logic, the practical nuts and bolts behind rules that might otherwise just seem to be about right and wrong.
And that lens, well, it has a name, the economic analysis of law. It's an approach that takes the core ideas of economics, costs, benefits, incentives, and applies them directly to the legal system. Now, this isn't about replacing traditional ideas like justice or morality, not at all. It's about adding another layer, giving us a really pragmatic tool to measure the real-world impact of our laws.
An idea this big doesn't just pop up overnight. It was built over decades by some pretty brilliant thinkers. Back in the mid-20th century, you had pioneers like Ronald Coase and Guido Calabresi who really laid the foundation. Then scholars like Richard Posner, along with Robert Cooter and Thomas Ullin, they built on that work and really brought this whole economic analysis of law thing into the mainstream. So how do we actually use this lens? What are the core principles that make it tick? Let's pop the hood and take a look at the user manual for this way of thinking.
Okay, so it all starts with one fundamental assumption, rational choice. It's this idea that, for the most part, people respond pretty logically to the world around them. We weigh the costs and benefits of our actions, and we try to get the most out of life. So if a law changes the price of doing something, it's pretty logical to assume our behavior is going to change right along with it.
The main tool we use when we're looking through this lens is cost-benefit analysis. It's actually a pretty straightforward concept. You just add up all the good things that come from a law, the benefits, and then you subtract all the bad things, the costs. If the benefits are bigger than the costs, then the law is seen as economically desirable. Simple as that.
And what's the ultimate goal of all this analysis? Well, in a word, efficiency. An efficient law is one that helps society use its resources in the best way possible, creating the most overall value and social welfare, all while cutting down on waste. It's really about getting the most bang for our societal buck. But here's where it gets interesting. Efficiency actually comes in a couple of different flavors. First, you have this perfect ideal called Pareto efficiency, where a change is only good if it helps at least one person without hurting anyone else. As you can imagine, that's almost impossible in the real world, so policymakers tend to use a more practical yardstick, Kaldor-Hicks efficiency. Think of it this way. A new factory creates jobs, but it also creates some pollution. That policy is considered efficient if the economic gains for the town are so big that the winners could, in theory, pay off the losers, say for their healthcare costs, and still have money left over. It's a pragmatic, but for sure a controversial way to measure progress. So if rational choice is the foundation of this whole thing, what's the engine that powers it? The answer is incentives. This is the concept that really makes the law start to look like a series of price tags.
When you boil it down, laws create incentives. They can be negative incentives, like fines or jail time, which jack up the price of a behavior we don't want. Or they can be positive incentives, like tax breaks or subsidies, which lower the price of a behavior that society wants to encourage.
All right, let's see this in action with a super simple example. Let's say society has a problem. Factories are pumping out way too much pollution, and it's hurting public health and the environment. So how does the law tackle this with an economic approach? It introduces a new incentive. It slaps a big financial penalty, a tax, or a fine on every ton of gunk a factory puts into the air. All of a sudden, polluting isn't free anymore. It has a real, direct cost.
And here's what happens. Faced with this new cost, the rational choice for the factory is to invest in cleaner technology. Why? Because now it's actually cheaper to clean up their act than it is to pay the penalty. The law just used an economic incentive to get a social goal, without ever having to order anyone around directly. Pretty clever, right?
And this logic doesn't just work for pollution. Let's use our new lens to peek at some really familiar areas of the law and see the hidden economic goals that are driving them. You see this economic logic running through the entire legal system. Property law gives you secure ownership of your home, which creates a huge incentive for you to invest in it and take care of it. Contract law makes promises legally binding, which lowers the risk of doing business. Tort law, which covers accidents, makes people liable for the harm they cause, giving everyone a really strong incentive to be more careful. And of course, criminal law directly raises the cost of harmful acts to try and stop people from doing them in the first place.
Okay, but like any powerful lens, this one is not perfect. It brings certain things into crystal clear focus, but it can also leave other, really important things kind of blurry in the background. It's absolutely crucial that we recognize its limits.
On the one hand, this approach is incredibly useful for designing smarter policies and predicting what might happen. But, and this is a big but, critics rightly point out that its intense focus on efficiency can sideline other essential values like justice, fairness, or human rights. It also kind of assumes that we're all just cold, calculating machines, when we all know that human behavior is way more complex and messy than that. And it begs the question, is maximum efficiency always the most important goal for a society?
So after looking at how it works, where it works, and its valid critiques, what's the big takeaway here? Why does this economic lens even matter?
You know, I think a quote from Cooter Newland, two of the pioneers in this field, just sums it up perfectly. Law isn't just some abstract set of commands from on high. No, it's a powerful, real-world mechanism for organizing our society, for shaping our behavior, and at the end of the day, for deciding who gets what.
So here's the crucial point. The economic lens isn't the only way to view the law, and it really shouldn't be. But it is an absolutely essential tool. Adding this perspective to our toolkit gives us a much deeper, more complete, and honestly, a more practical understanding of how our world is put together and how the rules we all live by actually work on the ground. So, I'll leave you with a challenge. Now that you have this lens, try looking at the world through it. The next time you see a new tax policy, or a simple traffic law, or even a rule at your job, just ask yourself, what behavior is this trying to encourage? What is it trying to discourage? What hidden incentives can you spot in the laws all around you? You might be surprised by what you find.